Earl drove home with his partner following close behind. Someone leaked the event, and there were reporters staged outside his house. His sister was talking to a reporter, and his mother and father were there also. Welcome back, my friends. I hope you are doing okay. Super thanks to my new subscribers. Comment where you are listening from. I'm eager to hear from you. Now let's get back to it, because things are getting real. As soon as the reporters recognized him, they turned from Doreen to him, shoving a microphone in his face. Detective Solano, we understand that it was your wife that was kidnapped, and this is the second time this has happened. I would like to give you the opportunity to speak to the kidnappers on the air. Maybe your plea will aid in her release. The reporter motioned for the camera to focus on the detective. Earl put up his hand and told the reporter that he didn't have anything to say on the air at this time and asked politely to be left alone. When the cameraman shut the camera off, Earl told the reporter that the police were doing everything in their power to apprehend the culprit and that the speedy return of his wife was in the works. Paul took the keys from his partner and ushered Earl's family into the house. Earl joined them a few minutes later. He leaned against the door and closed his eyes. He couldn't believe how fast his world had been turned upside down. "My God, what a mess," he uttered. His mother came to him and pulled him into her arms. There were tears in her eyes, and she told him that she would pray for Emma. His dad hugged him too and asked him if there was anything he could do. "Okay, I know that all of you mean well and that you feel that there is strength in numbers, but in this situation, I think I need room. I have a lot of work to do, and I can't have all of you hovering. I know that I have you to turn to when I need you, and I truly appreciate it. For now, I need you to leave. I promise to call as soon as I can." Paul opened the door as Earl's family shuffled out. They said they understood, but it didn't feel right. Earl's mother wanted to stay just in case he needed to talk, but Earl kissed her cheek and sent her on her way. "Okay, buddy, if I've learned anything at all about you, it is that you're always thinking. I'm at your disposal. What have you got in mind?" "Nothing concrete yet. I'll have to tell Dobbs that I'm keeping this copy of the note." He walked into the kitchen and sat at the table. "This note," he said, smoothing it out onto the table between him and Paul, "tells me one thing. It tells me that this guy is out for revenge and not for money. He hasn't asked for any amount. The eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth is the revenge part. The part about presidents and saints sharing a closet is the puzzle. This person wants to have some fun. I am supposed to figure this out, and if I do, I'll find her. But he means to hurt Emma because he wants revenge. The notes I received at the station are part of this. I couldn't get any prints off of them other than the mail handlers, and they'd been checked out. They were collected from different parts of the city, so I couldn't get a fix on them. This guy is clever and resourceful. Paul, I can't think of any suspect from our past as partners, or mine from before, who could want revenge in this manner. However, if this guy is copying a past case, then it has to be the Bolton case. Bolton was the one who kidnapped Emma. This guy watched a lot of television to get information. It could be anybody. Maybe someone newly released, as Dobbs suggested. If that's the case, then we need to go over our files. Dobbs probably already commandeered them, but I have backup files at home. I can go get them if you're up to it. I also think we should examine Emma's dreams. You did say that you documented them, so I think we should start with them." Earl stood up and went into his home office to get his files. He tried very hard to not remember the last time he and Emma had been in the office together. It was the night she had alcohol poisoning. They had made love right there on a pallet on the floor. He left the office quickly and rejoined Paul. He showed Paul the detailed notes he'd taken of the dreams, from the first dream to that last one. He'd written down what she said, no matter how vague. Something of a shock, isn't it, to see it all on paper? I don't know why I took the time to write them down, but now I'm glad that I did. It sort of brings home to me how awful it was for her to be part of it. I'm not a woman, but I can relate to how horrendous it must be to be in fear of being violated. I've had to comfort her when she didn't want me to. Most of those nights she was afraid of me. I couldn't touch her. She'd sit in the single chair in the living room with every light turned on. She was afraid of the dark. I'd find her cowering in that chair with her eyes wild with fear. And to think that at this very moment that she is in the dark, fighting off a deranged... "Stop doing that to yourself," Paul scolded him. "Stop putting images in your mind that's going to make you careless. You should use whatever you feel to fuel the search. just like we worked together to find her when Bolton took her the first time. If you can detach yourself for a minute, we need to analyze the scenes in the dream." Earl took a deep breath. "You're right, of course. I can feel sorry for myself or make use of the time to find my wife." Right then, the dream always starts where she is in a dark room. The dark is constant. She never sees his face. That doesn't help with Sam's description either. She said that the man looked like an Indian. To me, that translates into an ethnic group. Let's say that he appears to be an Indian, a man with long hair. Paul tapped his fingers on the table. That's half the population of Hispanic men these days. It's the style to wear their hair long in a ponytail, like Antonio Banderas. Earl wrinkled his nose. "Why would you think he's Hispanic? We've put away both Caucasian and Latinos. And if this fellow is newly released, then he'd have to have been in a New York jail. Or if not newly released, up on the news to have seen what happened. Maybe it is a colleague of the guys from the college? The three we photographed are dead, but if you recall when Bolton made his confession, he was careful not to implicate his associates at the warehouse. It could be one of those guys." "All right, if that's the case," Paul concluded for his partner, "then we have to assume that one of those guys was related to either Walter or one of the dead, which would tie in with the revenge score." Paul stood up and looked at his watch. It was getting late, and he hadn't called his wife yet. He whipped out his phone and called Tina. From the one-sided conversation, Earl deduced that she already knew what had happened. Paul assured her that Earl was doing well and that he would be home soon. "Tina sends her best and wants you to know that her prayers are with you." Earl nodded. "Look, dude, you need to go home and be with your wife and family. There's not much we can do right now. I just want you to know that I appreciate you staying with me," Earl said. He stood up, indicating that he was serious about Paul going home. Paul didn't argue and left, promising to be back first thing in the morning with their past files. Earl watched his partner drive off and close the door, noting that two more remote stations were outside his door. He didn't acknowledge them, but he did look up and down the street that was suddenly unfamiliar to see if there was anything suspicious. The kidnapper was probably parked across the street or one of the spectators gathering outside. He would have to ask Dobbs to run interference for him and get those cameras away from him. He was surprised that after taking a shower and slipping into a pair of sweats that he was not as refreshed as he thought he'd be. He had been racking his brain to figure this thing out, and he couldn't keep from thinking that Emma was hurt or being hurt at the very moment. Emma shook her head to clear it, and she realized that she was hungry. She hadn't had a chance to eat before the attack. It happened so fast and just as she had returned from the clinic. She had been to see if Doreen could do her a favor. She had been feeling off and just wanted to check out a hunch. Doreen promised she would call as soon as she got the results. It didn't seem possible that she was pregnant, but it didn't hurt to check. Except for that one time when she had no control of herself, where alcohol proved to cause more than a hangover. They'd been protected every time. On the drive home from the clinic, Doreen had called her to tell her that she was indeed pregnant. She had been both excited and thoughtful. As much as Earl hinted at children, she wasn't sure he'd be happy. She had planned on how to tell him and had swung by her in-laws to pick up Sam. As Emma eased the car in the driveway, a man approached them. He was saying something, but she couldn't hear him. The windows were up and the radio was on. As she got out of the car, she cautioned Sam to stay in the car, but it was too late. Sam had already gotten out. The man had a piece of paper in his hand and he was pointing to it and spoke in a heavy Hispanic accent. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I am looking for this address and I can't find it. Can you help me?" "What's the address?" asked Emma. She was willing to help the stranger. Even though he looked scary, his smile and his demeanor didn't make him seem dangerous. She looked at the piece of paper, but she couldn't make the writing out. "I have a better one in the car. I get it," the stranger had said. She watched as the man walked over to his car parked on the street. It was a red van, and he opened the side door to reveal landscaping equipment. He took a rag in his hands and turned to her. It took her a split second to register that the man meant them harm. He was on her before she could scream. He held the rag tightly to her mouth while avoiding her frantic kicks at him. He reached to grab Sam, but she screamed and ran from him. He hesitated for a second before he cut his losses and dragged Emma into the van. He held her throat tightly until she fell unconscious. Emma assumed that he had driven off soon after. It was dark where she was, and her hands were bound tightly behind her back. Vaguely, she thought that she should be afraid, but she wasn't. She was fascinated. It wasn't like her nightmares, but close enough. Her hands were tied just like in the dream, and here she was, gagged just like in the dreams. The only difference was that she saw who her attacker was. In the dreams, he was always in shadow. This man was huge, very muscular. He was Hispanic with long hair. She should have thought something was up just because he looked out of the ordinary. The man was walking around with his hair loose like an Indian. If only she hadn't dreamt at all. She would have been able to fully appreciate the horror she knew would unfold. Instead, she was mentally taking notes to see how accurate her dreams were. It was pitch dark where she was, and no amount of straining was going to make her vision any better. There wasn't any light to make night vision possible. There was a smell, though. It was musty like a damp, unwashed mop. Emma giggled. Wow, she must really be losing her mind, she thought. Moments later, she moaned. It was a horrible thing for Sam to witness, but she was so proud of her. She ran from the man and went to get help. That saved her from being kidnapped too. When she saw her daughter again, she was going to give her a big hug and tell her just how proud she was of her. It was a very big definite that she would see her daughter again. She had every confidence that Earl and Paul would find her. She thought about her life and how precious it was to her now, all that she had to be thankful for. She had let her guard down and found love. With her ordeal behind her, she had grabbed her life with both hands. She had wanted to have Samantha live with them, but Earl had cautioned her to wait. Since Emma still taught 2 classes a week and Earl's work schedule had not been predictable enough to ensure that Sam would have a parent home, when she came home from school, it made sense that they continue as before. On weekends, she could come home and stay with her mother and her daddy Earl. They spent as much time with Sam as possible, and everyone was satisfied. Matt had gotten married too, and he and Angela were happy. They had moved to a house closer to his parents' home so that Sam would have more supervision. Emma felt sure that Emily had some say in the new home selection because it was just too perfect. She had felt the urge to take Angela aside to give her a heads up on Emily, but she had made the mistake of talking it over with Earl. Her husband had advised her to mind her own business. Yes, Emma was satisfied with the way her life was, and now this new menace put a big question mark on it. She'd lived long enough to finally find her niche, and she wanted it to continue. Shit! Now she was afraid. The next morning, Earl awoke annoyed that he had slept at all. He had spent most of the night preparing what his next move should be. All he had to do was wait for Paul to bring him the files, and together they would pick them apart to find the likely suspect and get his wife back. How could he have missed it? All the signs were there. The dreams, the notes sent to the precinct, all of them were clues. Perhaps he should have taken Emma's dreams more seriously than thinking that she needed therapy for the first kidnapping. If he had, she would be home with him now, where she belonged. Instead, she was being subjected to all manner of horrors. His heart ached for her. Emma must be so frightened, he thought. He'd give anything to spare her the terrors of her dreams. How could he face her this time, knowing that he had been given warnings and he had ignored them? He felt responsible for all of it. He had to find her. The confidence she had in his abilities the first time she was taken had made it possible for their life together now. So he had to be the one to find her this time too. Otherwise, she might not feel safe with him anymore, and he would lose her. That's what he would do. He would be her hero again and bring her home. The alternative was too awful to bear. Not to have her in his life was not an option. He would solve this mystery and put that animal where he belonged. His woman would be safe again. Earl blew out his breath and went to answer the door. His partner was a godsend. They worked well together, and their differences complemented each other. When they were first assigned to each other, he had his doubts. They were too different. Paul was smart, but he was too laid back for his liking. While Earl was straightforward and British to the core, it was unlikely that they would mesh. But they did, and now Earl couldn't fathom working with anyone else. He opened the door to Paul, who backed his way in. There was a reporter pushing a microphone in his face. "Sorry, man, no comment," Paul said to the reporter. Earl pulled him in and shut the door. Without a word, he picked up the cordless phone and dialed Dobbs' line. When Dobbs answered, Earl told him that he needed him to get the news people out of his hair, and that since he was the primary on the case, he should be dealing with the press. He also told him that he would be in sometime during the day to catch up with him, and then he hung up. Have they been out there all night? Asked Paul. I don't know, but I can't have them underfoot. I know that you've been brainstorming just like I was. What have you got? He asked as he led the way to the kitchen. He had brewed coffee and poured 2 mugs and sat at the table facing his partner. Not much. I went through the file on Bolton and the names of the so-called associates he wouldn't give up from the warehouse and came up empty. I had been up early checking out these guys, and for the life of me, I can't find the connection that spelled family. Then I thought that maybe he hadn't meant family in the blood sense, but family in the brotherhood gang sense. Once those guys saw me, they all clammed up. Only one chance to talk with me, and I couldn't get anything from him. He was mostly scared that he would get arrested for his small part in the previous case. All he did was stock packages, and he didn't even know what was in them. You know, most of the staff at the warehouse was innocent, and only a few knew what was going on. I think the warehouse is a dead end. I agree. Who else do we have that might have latched on to mimicking Walter? Earl asked. I thought that Walter might have a long-lost relative who might not like Walter being behind bars. I even took a leap of faith here, thinking that, with Walter locked up, someone isn't being taken care of financially. I thought that because Walter was an only child, and he wasn't dating anyone seriously. We also have Ephraim and Carlos, who were the key players at the college. They were dead but have family. We need to find who is looking to avenge his family. We also need to have a talk with Walter. He might know something, Earl said. Hey, you're right. We have to do this without stepping on Dobbs' toes, and then we'll be home free, Paul said. That is going to be very hard with him not liking us and all. Really, what gave you that impression? Asked Paul with a smile. It was no secret Dobbs was jealous of the Derrick and Solano team. Later at the station, Earl sat in Dobbs' office and waited for him to acknowledge him. He was on the phone with his wife. Look, honey, I really have to go. I don't know what time I'll be home. I'm sorry I'm missing out on Junior's game, but I promise I'll make it up to him this weekend, okay? Good morning, Detective Dobbs. I called to alert you that I was coming in, but you weren't in yet. I wanted to know if you had any leads that I might be able to help you with. Earl was ready to be cooperative as much as Dobbs would let him be. Solano, I must say that any help will be appreciated by you, and you might remember that I am the lead on this case. You are a narcotics detective, and I am homicide, so I don't need any of your help unless it's in the form of information that I might require. And if you do, let my team know. Now, if you don't have anything useful to tell me, I have to get back to work. Paul was sitting next to Earl and noticed the clenched fists and grabbed Earl's arm before he could deliver. Say, Dobbs, which of your team members should we report to? Mahoney. Dobbs sat back down and answered without looking up from the paper he was scribbling on. Paul dragged Earl out of the office and led him to the elevator. He let go only when they were in the parking lot. That Dobbs is going to get his one day. Forget him and his team. We're going to do this ourselves. If Dobbs has that attitude toward us, then you know his team is also going to be like-minded. Yeah, I guess it's up to us again. This time we work harder. At least with SI, they were sincere in the work they did. Dobbs and guys like him are assholes. The partners spent the rest of the morning and afternoon tracking down their own leads. They couldn't identify the van because Sam didn't think to read the license plates. All they had on it was that it was red. Santiago didn't have any male family who wanted revenge. His mother was strung out on drugs and didn't know that her son was dead. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, and his father had been dead even longer. Ephraim Rivera had a lot of family all over the place. They systematically tracked down all family members on file. Earl went through the roof when he found out that his landscaper was Ephraim Rivera's cousin. He had a red van. After having the van searched and questioning Carlos, he found out that Ephraim's father sometimes used the van. With information from Carlos, they had an address, but when they went to it, found that it had been vacated. Ephraim's father, Raphael, had moved out and didn't leave a forwarding address. Ephraim's mother was still devastated. She, however, had moved on. Ephraim was her son by her first husband. Raphael, as far as she knew, he was rotting in jail somewhere. She had remarried and had other children. It was her grandchildren she was babysitting. She warned them to leave her alone and that she didn't want any trouble. By the end of the day, the partners had nothing solid to go on and too many ifs to chase. Earl had put a call through to Stillwell, and he had finally returned his call. He listened as Stillwell wished him luck in his search, but couldn't spare time to help him. Earl went home that evening to an empty house and hated it, his mind playing out all sorts of scenarios on what Emma might be going through. When his mind played a potential rape scene over one time too many, he got up and left the house. He ended up at his parents, who rallied around him. Emma no longer felt her hands. They had gone numb and she was hot, and she figured that she must be in an enclosed room with no circulating air. She was no longer fascinated by her predicament. This man had not returned and her body was protesting being in this position for so long. She pushed herself up to a sitting position. She banged her hands against something, and the pain that shot up her arm was unbearable. Everything hurt. She couldn't tell what time it was, or even if it was still day. That was disorienting in itself because she couldn't keep track of time. He must have taken her watch because it had glow-in-the-dark features. That, or it got lost in the struggle. Are any of you worrying right now? You need to stay tuned to find out how this ends. She had been eternally grateful that she hadn't worn her wedding ring that morning because he would have taken it. Emma continued to slowly straighten her body to ease her discomfort. When her legs were straight in front of her, she realized that they were tied at the ankles. No wonder they hurt so much. There was tape across her mouth and a rag in it. God, she hoped it wasn't that rag she'd seen him pick up at the start. It was so dirty. She was leaning against the wall when the idea struck her. Slowly getting to her knees, Emma felt for the wall with her face and rubbed it against the wall. The idea was to rub the tape off her face. It was slow going because the wall was smooth. After what seemed like hours, the tape fell off and she spat out the rag, gagged and spat again. Suddenly she could smell and was horrified that what she thought was musty was far worse. There was something dead in here with her. Well, that's it for now. Comment what you think, feel, and would like to see happen. Don't forget to spread the word and subscribe. Bye for now.